Watch this video if you want to learn if you are already ignoring 3 huge signs that your glamping site budget for constructing it and launching it is completely wrong. When it comes to budgeting to build a glamping business, that is going to be broken down into 3 different phases, all of which could have surprises if you do not plan correctly. The first is that you have an insufficient budget for site planning and preparation. What is site planning and preparation? Well, it's kind of how it sounds. It is the steps that you need to take in order to prepare your land to be built on. And in fact, before you can even prepare it, you need to know if you can build the type of project that you're envisioning. And that might actually be dictated by 2 things. First, the land itself, and the second is what the local jurisdiction will and will not allow. So when it comes to the land itself, there may be trees that you need to knock down, there may be areas that need to be made more flat, and there may be things that you need to know about the land before you can even get to that step. So let's talk about the things that you need to know. If your piece of property is not able to connect to public water and sewage, then you're going to need to be able to install an infrastructure system that can handle that. For example, when it comes to the collection and removal of human waste, you may need to install what's called a septic tank. And that is a tank that is installed underground and it collects all of the waste that comes from your plumbing system. Now, the size and the type of septic tank will largely be determined by the type of soil that you have on your particular piece of property. And you'll have to perform what is called a perk test to tell you what type of soil you have and the rate at which the water filters through it. And the results of that test will then dictate the type of septic tank that you can put in. Now, that tends to be the most common and easiest type of assessment in the site prep phase, but your county and even for your own peace of mind may require that you do what's called a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And essentially this is a more in-depth study that is looking for things like pollution and hazardous materials to ensure that the property is safe to be built on. So how would you know if you need a perk test or something larger like an environmental site assessment? Well, one of the first steps that you should take after finding a piece of property is get a referral from your realtor or a local engineer. That local engineer can look at your particular piece of property and they will be able to tell you what tests you need. They may even have some background knowledge around what type of soil is there, whether you'll be able to pass a perk test. They'll probably also know whether or not there have been similar projects that have been done in the area and can give you all of that background. But essentially, they will walk you through the process of all of the various tests that you may need on that piece of property. They will also liaise with the county to get all of that information recorded. So an engineer is going to be a critical member of your team when it comes to the site planning and site prep. Typically, they charge an hourly rate and you'll need to budget for that because a loan is not going to be able to cover that because you're going to have to go through all of these steps before you even close on the property. So in addition to the hourly rate of the engineer, you're also going to have to pay anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s for any of the tests that may be required. So be sure to plan ahead for that. Okay, so you have determined that your site can be built upon, and now you need to actually prepare it to be built. Are there any trees that need to be removed? You are going to have to install your infrastructure at this time, and some of these costs may or may not be able to be covered by a loan. So this is really the time when you should be talking to local lenders who could potentially fund your project to see what costs for site prep they would actually cover. And this is a referral you're going to want to get from your realtor. So I hope you're seeing now that your realtor is probably going to be the most important member of your team because they're going to connect you to the other people that you need that will help you get this glamping site up and running. Okay, so the second warning sign that your glamping site budget is insufficient is you haven't adequately planned for the construction phase. Now, this is kind of the most exciting part where you start to see your vision come to reality because your plumbing is being laid, the roads are being put in, your structures are being built. Now, I haven't encountered any sort of construction or rehab project where it has gone completely according to the plan and according to the budget. there will be overages. And your success is really going to depend on the extent to which you have adequately planned for those surprises that are inevitably going to come your way. So here's a few of the surprises that can pop up, and here are some ways that you can handle it. So the first type of surprise that can pop up is unexpected conditions on the actual building site. What do I mean by that? So here's one example. Let's say that your builder is digging because they're going to start putting in the plumbing and electrical wiring, and they encounter huge pieces of rock within the soil, and the equipment that they have can't handle those pieces of rock. So they're going to have to stop work, get equipment that can handle it, and they may need a new person who's an expert in operating that equipment. And that's going to cost you extra time and extra money. Now, this certainly may not happen in your case, but the point here is that the conditions of the property just are not ever going to be known to the full extent. So just be sure that you have some money set aside to be able to handle it, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So the second type of condition that can happen during the construction phase that can really kind of blow up things like your budget is the cost of materials could change drastically. We saw in 2020 and 2021 that the cost of building materials completely skyrocketed, and especially for things like lumber. I think lumber, we were doing a rehab project and lumber went up like 3 times in the middle of our project, which kind of blew up our budget. So something like that could certainly happen again, maybe not as drastically, but keep in mind that when the construction budget is initially drafted, it is based on the cost of materials at that time. And it could take anywhere from a couple of months to like a year or more in between when the construction budget is originally done and you're actually performing the construction. So you'll need to be mentally prepared that the cost of materials could shift and obviously impact your budget. So what are the ways that you can kind of handle these unknowns? So there's a few. The first and the easiest is to include a contingency within your overall budget. And what a contingency is just a pot of money set aside within your budget that can handle these unexpected costs. And there tends to be an industry standard for contingency budget, and that tends to be around 15%. So if you have $1 million construction budget, then about $150,000 will be set aside for any of these emergencies. The second way that you can handle these unexpected costs is to get a fixed price contract with your builder, or do a contract like a cost plus and with a not to exceed amount. So a fixed price contract is like it sounds. You say the entire project is going to cost this amount and that is what you are charged. And in the event of some type of contingency that exceeds the contingency budget, then the builder would be responsible for handling that. Now, the risk here is that your builder can't afford it, and therefore your project can't get finished and you're going to have to start all over again with someone else. So you'll want to be sure, if you do a fixed price contract, that the builder's financials are really sound. And you can do things like ask for their profit and loss statement for the most recent tax year to get a sense of what their financials look like. Now, if you do a cost plus model with a not to exceed amount, you're essentially saying, this is how much we will pay you for the job, plus, 15, 20% for your profit, with an overall not to exceed amount. So, and that not to exceed amount gives you a little bit of wiggle room in case costs go over. And I would say this tends to be the more common way to pay your builder, is the cost plus with the not to exceed amount. Now, the third way that you can address the construction budget getting completely blown up is to just get more educated on how construction budgets are built, what goes into them, and what are the common terms that are used. I took a really basic course on Udemy that went over Construction Budgeting 101, and I just feel a lot more equipped to be able to talk to my builder about, what is the work breakdown structure, what are their costs in terms of site security, things like that I wouldn't necessarily know to ask about. So I highly recommend spending a few bucks to take a low-cost course just to get yourself a bit more educated on the subject. Okay, so the third and final warning sign that your glamping site construction budget is completely inadequate is that you haven't factored in the costs for final touches. and specifically landscaping and all of the outdoor amenities. Now look, people go glamping so that they can be outdoors in nature, and you want their experience in that space to be memorable. The last thing that you want to do is have these beautiful structures surrounded by mud because you didn't factor in the cost to create pathways, or you didn't factor in the cost to put in things like hot tubs and fire pits and outdoor furniture, which are probably not going to be able to be covered by your construction load. So not only are you going to have to factor in what that cost will be, you're going to have to identify a way to pay for it. What we're probably going to do is we're probably just going to get a business credit card that has like 0% interest for a certain amount of time, and then use the revenue from our glamping site to pay down the debt on that business card. But don't be surprised if landscaping costs in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But just know that it is an investment well made, because you're helping to create memories for your guests, and you're creating a space that they're going to want to return to over and over again. So in the landscaping and outdoor experience, this is not the place to save. Want to ensure that your glamping business becomes a reality? Then check out this video here where I walk you step by step through the process of starting a successful glamping site. Click below for all of my links to help you launch, furnish, and decorate your glamping site like a pro, as well as become a host and earn $40 after hosting your first guest. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Bye-bye.